Well, welcome those that have joined us. I'm very pleased, Teresa Spangler here at Plaza Bridge Group, and pleased to present to you this morning with our guest speakers, transforming opportunities into great products and solutions. And we have as a guest with us today, Gunnar Newquist, who is an entrepreneur and PhD scientist who's delivered software and hardware products in the entertainment and biotech space. His products include neuroscience-based AI algorithms from his own research and from automation robots. And he's a published author with 9 publications appearing in the prestigious venues such as Science and Scientific America. He's also a keynote speaker in scientific and tech and business conferences and able to speak at both a technical and a lay audience across the globe. And he's a former pioneer, extreme ski athlete, which you definitely want to hear stories about at some point in time from him, and a former concert pianist. And you can see his wonderful piano in the background there. A proven high achiever combined with fitness, the finesse, attention to detail, and all of his endeavors. And I've got fitness on my mind, Gunnar, so. And then I'll introduce many of you know my partner, Richard Spangler, Chief Product Officer at Plaza Bridge Group. He's a leading business development consultant. Recognized change accelerator, creates actionable results. He has an intense desire to help growth companies migrate through the maze of issues and to help execute executive and entrepreneurial acceleration into success while minimizing errors. His expertise includes product strategy, management, entrepreneurship, mergers and acquisitions, with over 25 years experience in both large companies and those of startups and corporate development and acquisitions. He is also a musician. I would not classify him as a concert musician, but you can ask him about his endeavors and his band, the Headless Chickens. So that will take the agenda, and Richard's going to kind of kick off and share his screen, and we'll walk through these slides and have the two of them talk a little bit about how we turn these opportunities into great products. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to those a little bit later in the session. So we appreciate you being here. Let's get started, Richard.
Right, I appreciate that, Teresa. Thanks, and appreciate everybody coming to the webinar. It's a pretty intimate group, so I would like us to be very loose and feel free to jump in anytime you want. I think what I really wanted to do here was kind of bring in some new perspectives on product management and on the way to capturing new opportunities. Really talk about, maybe some of my experiences or certainly my thoughts on product management, on how to migrate through the maze of developing a product and convincing those internal and external to a company on the vision and bringing kind of a consensus and looking at the opportunities, but also looking at the challenges that are out there for product managers. Certainly one of the first opportunities for a product manager, especially software and hardware, is often this idea of developing a platform versus a point product, especially in an early kind of startup situation where you're really hungry for some revenue, and taking the time to develop a platform that then you have to hunt for specific applications or contexts of that. It's quite difficult, but that's also the opportunity. Can you expand it from maybe a point product idea to a platform that might have broader market appeal over time? It's kind of it's a bit of a catch-22 in the sense that if you choose point product, then you're going to get some early revenue. Probably you've got a tighter target market you're going after, a known user, maybe even some some early friendlies start to buy your product. and you feel like you're really getting accelerated, but it's like Chinese food, right? I mean, it's like you get satiated on that, and you don't realize you've kind of limited your long-term strategic vision potential. And do you translate that into describing it as a platform instead, so that you can, you can have some broader appeal down the way, and develop a much more robust revenue picture. Of course, the key decision criteria during this analysis is how much capital and how much resource do you have available to you? Can you wait out the platform concept? Can you wait out your vision of developing a platform and that has broader appeal, because it's going to take longer as opposed to a point product? And that's a decision that every product manager or product executive has to make early on in the development process, and it requires a pretty detailed analysis, and frankly, getting some feedback from your sources of capital, whether they be venture or otherwise, on how well will they stick with you over the long term. Some other opportunities is really, developed through the customer-driven discovery and emerging use cases. How do you really tap into your customers, and how do you understand what the customer is really asking for? As a product manager, we always talk to our users and our prospects, and we always get things like, if I had a sensor that measured this in the manufacturing setting, I could solve my problem. Well, that's kind of a solution. When a customer asks you for a solution, or tells you their solution, when you're the one that's going to deliver the solution, you have to ask what's behind that, because otherwise you'll go build a sensor and that finds out that's not what they want. So you really want to try to educate your prospects and customers on how to describe their problem in detail, and not give you the solutions. The solutions come from the company and the provider of solutions. So, but one of the things you can do also is turn your customers into innovators of your product. Set up systems and processes that allow them to use your product, or describe your product in lots of different ways. I mean, something as simple as contests, something as simple as challenges to your customers to think about your product in different ways. Query them on are they using other products in conjunction with your products that you're not aware of. Often there's great opportunity for understanding customer needs when they show you that they use several different products together. And if you're not aware of that, if you're so hyper focused on your own product, you miss a lot of interesting customer intelligence. So what mechanisms can you put in place to gather that insight? Do you have pretty good open channels of communications from your customers, whether they be virtual or physical? The real trick here is to make sure you have multiple avenues that the customer finds appropriate for their own purposes. Often companies will set up customer feedback mechanisms where it's laborious, it's outside the mainstream of a way somebody works. I mean, somebody might prefer just to text a number and text an idea or an issue, as opposed to having to get on to the website and fill out a form that takes 10 minutes. So you have to be very creative on how you get that customer feedback. And frankly, user meetings, they're now, I mean, hopefully we're on the backside of COVID and in a real struggle, but user meetings are coming back. One of one of the tools that we used quite often in one of the companies that I work for was, basically focus, real life focus groups on with leading influencers in the industry to get insight on how people were using our products and what was going to happen in the future. Another opportunity is keeping abreast of changing market conditions and understanding the trends that exist in the marketplace. It has been in my experience that most of the real innovation and the real product insights can come from trends in the marketplace that aren't directly associated with your product. And so you have to make sure as a product manager or product executive that you have to have your ear to peripheral markets. If I'm interested in IoT, I want to make sure that I understand manufacturing and the trends in manufacturing, not just IoT sensors in manufacturing. You have to broaden your expertise out just a little bit because those trends tend to influence how your product will evolve and the context in which your product is placed. Also, you want to anticipate opportunities and find yourself a methodology where you can get additional insight into future opportunities. I, for example, use kind of what I call a technology context timing model. That is, create an expertise in a particular technology, understand all the different contexts that technology can be placed, understand what would be required and who would use it and why would they use it and what problems that solution satisfies, and then discuss and then determine what's the timing of that, right? I mean, and is that timing appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish in the company or as a startup? Timing is usually the variable that will get you into the most trouble because you have limited resources and time, and if you're choosing to build something or to go after a market that's 5 years down the road, you might find yourself essentially running half a marathon and not being able to finish. A good example, for example, is quantum computing, right? I mean, quantum computing's been around for 5-10 years, and a lot of people kind of jumped in. A lot of people are still jumping in, but the experts will tell you it's at least 5 years off. Do you have that? Do you have that that kind of the resources to last to that point? Also, I'll tell you a little story. I was at a conference where a very prominent venture capitalist was speaking, and he said to everybody in the audience that he has an advantage over everybody because he gets called into universities and he gets hand-fed all the latest academic discoveries. For the average person, the alternative is to be very aware of the academic literature that's out there, and stay abreast of what's happening in academia, because it's a leading indicator of what's happening out there in the marketplace and in the future. The other opportunity is really look for competitive signaling of your customers. Look for what they're doing in future capabilities and how it supports their brand, and understand how you can also use market blocking to counter them or to carve out a barrier for yourself. Market blocking being get a partner locked in that maybe your competitor would love to have, get access to certain technologies, or if you've invented certain things, then you can, basically, and you don't necessarily want to use them directly in your product, but you can open disclose them to the marketplace by publishing about it, which prevents the, patentable, your competitors from patenting that kind of capability. So in addition, but there's some challenges to doing this, and there's challenges with everything, but in particular with product management is this idea that a company is designed to be extremely efficient and do what it does now. And so when you have to come in with an innovation or a new product, it's very difficult to drive it in through the organization, and you'll get resistance. You'll get alienation, possibly from the mainstream management. They'll deprioritize you potentially. They'll shrink your resources, or they'll tell you that we've been there and done that. But the important thing is to understand that resistance and understand how to counter it, and even potentially use it to your advantage by setting expectations that are favorable to those that are giving you the most resistance. You also have that investment risk appetite. We talked earlier about timing. What is the investment risk profile of the senior executives? There was some academic studies done recently that indicate that the shorter the executive team is to retirement, the more resistant they are to innovation. And the reason, obviously, is they're still, they just want to get to their end career, and so they don't want to have any mix-ups. Younger executives are still in that proving mode, and they're more likely to embrace far-reaching innovation that have a much higher risk profile. And of course, venture capital firms are basically bet the company, and they're comfortable with that, and so they can often be a huge ally in creating innovation and new products. You also have to be kind of aware of the challenge of an inverted management structure, which is where the operations managers, who are very good at process-oriented thinking and process-oriented achievement, become the senior executives, where really the vision and the strategy plays a much greater role. And they can often create some bottlenecks for you if you're trying to push through innovation. So be careful of that. Also developing the skills, the interpersonal skills, not just technical or content-oriented skills, but persuasion skills in leveraging your persuasiveness, because you're not going to have a lot of power as a product manager moving products in a company, and develop that ability to sell, and the ability to tell a story about your product and how it fits in with the marketplace. And be particularly careful about the requirements chasm. I mean, that is something that I've seen consistently over my career in developing new products, and that is taking requirements and articulating requirements almost as solutions, and the in and of themselves, versus allowing the development organization to create the solution. For example, you might say, if you were going to build a car, you would say, well, I want rubber tires, and I want it to be blue, and on and on and on. You're describing the car, but it doesn't give the engineers an opportunity to say, well, why do you want, what are the reasons behind rubber tires? What are the reasons behind certain shapes of the car? And they often create unexpected innovations within that context. And And you can be a product manager that delivers requirements that are actually reducing the innovativeness of your development team, and you have to be careful with that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gunnar to talk a little bit about his background or his experiences in these perspectives on product management. Gunnar?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. So one of the main things I wanted to talk about was this concept of what the job of the product manager is. And the worst thing you can be as a product manager is the person that's constantly putting out fires, trying to solve all the problems after the fact, rather than being the person that anticipates the problems and gets ahead of it by thinking long-term, going through these opportunities. So how do you do that? Well, I'm going to go through a couple of these opportunities and challenges that Richard put forth and describe some examples. So can you move to the next slide, please? So this is an example from my own experience when I started a company called Brain2Bot. And I went exactly through what Richard was talking about, this struggle between point product and platform. And it really had to do with capital resource availability. And so I started with the idea of let's make a robotic pet that had this great brain inside of it. And so we went through and we had the product really nailed from a requirements perspective and from what the customers were expecting. But turned out we did not have enough capital to manufacture this expensive point product. So we actually had a little bit of the opposite problem that you might expect, that platform might be more expensive. With a manufacturing product, you can run into the tens of millions of dollars to manufacture as well. So thinking about that, since we didn't have this manufacturing ability, but we had this brain that could be used in all sorts of applications, and we even had feedback from customers that it would be interesting to them to use this brain in other forms, we built an API out of it, which really didn't cost any money to build. However, the cost is in, well, how do we sell it? Who do we sell it to? How do we get customers? And so after all this trouble of jumping from a point product to an API, we still didn't have a sale. So we couldn't really wait it out. We didn't have this kind of runway to figure out exactly how to make it work licensing. And we didn't have a proof of principle to demonstrate to people in the marketplace how that brain API would work for them. So it'd be a lot harder to actually deliver a platform that nobody understands because they don't see a real life example in the marketplace yet. So went back to the point product idea, but instead of an expensive manufacturing product, we went to a digital product where you could still have a being with a brain, but it would be on your computer, so no manufacturing cost, and it would be interacting directly with you through the computer. And this strange art form you see on the right is basically the user interface. It would change forms as it showed its emotions to you, the way that you're interacting with it. So in the end, we were able to deliver a point product, but we went through this whole process of too expensive of a point product versus what the capital we had, an API that we didn't know how to sell, and then back finally to a point product that we could make. In the end, it would have been great to have gone back to the API experience because there was interest, but we didn't again have the capital and the time to be able to do that appropriately. So next, please. So another opportunity, talking about the changing market conditions and thinking about peripheral trends. So one thing that's happening a lot during COVID, obviously, is social isolation. But it turns out that trend of social isolation in cities was actually increasing before COVID even started. And so because of this, there was already some experience in the market with trying to fix the social isolationism. And so there were some products already poised to be ready to jump on the opportunity with COVID, right? Where suddenly everybody is remote. So Zoom is a great example that just accelerated because there's so many people that are no longer in person. But there's other things to think about here. It's not just business opportunities, business to business, face-to-face communication. There's other products that could be helpful in your social isolation at home. What can give you comfort while you can't get out and see people? And so with that, robot perspective, you might be just trying to make either a robot for business purposes like Pepper Robot from SoftBank, or you might be just making a toy robot like we were trying to do. But guess what? In social isolation, you might be able to leverage the fact that people need comfort and make a robot that will comfort you in your home from something you've already started in another business application. So thinking about like how social, interactions are changing through time and what can affect that can help you leverage the position of what your product is in relation to that social norm. So how about the next one, please? Thinking about something that's a little more deep tech here. When you're talking about technology, context, and timing, this is a real huge challenge for people. I mean, Richard makes it sound easy, but you got to be a real pro to do this correctly. So think about deep learning. Deep learning is all over the news. It's being applied everywhere. But if you dig a little deeper, maybe had started reading the academic journals before it started getting into the mainstream, you would understand that there's a lot of brittleness to deep learning. And there's a lot of parts of deep learning that's not really understood how they're making decisions. So if you know that, okay, deep learning can be used in a lot of ways, but it's not fail-safe, right? So if you're going to try to turn deep learning into a critical application, a medical application, self-driving cars, government security, you got to really be careful because there's a lot of published cases out there where it can be attacked through adversarial examples and completely the model can fall apart. It can just fail because you tried a new thing that it never saw before. Let's say you're trying to understand tumors and you put a foot there instead of a lung. No deep learning system is going to identify that very well. So even though there's so much opportunity in deep learning, there's going to be some real expensive mistakes that are happening because they tried to deploy these models in critical conditions too early, not understanding the context. That means there's a huge opportunity for people thinking outside the box and have been reading this literature for a while. Academics have been for years trying to fix these problems by making explainable AI and other solutions that are not as brittle. So if you can figure out how to leverage those other opportunities or leverage that technology, you have a huge opportunity in all of these mission critical locations, not to mention consumer applications where places like Europe is starting to go towards regulation that says you must understand why the AI is making decisions to show it to a consumer. So think about how different the world will be when you start leveraging these other types of technologies that are not just deep learning, and that can change the entire paradigm and be a huge moneymaker for you. But one last thing I should mention: if you didn't understand the marketplace with that, you might miss it entirely because there's so much, technological know-how that you need to be able to do this. So it's something where you have to be pretty immersed in the tech, and getting familiar with the academic literature helps you do that. Okay, so moving on to challenges. Company innovation resistance. I just wanted to extrapolate on one of those that I think is probably the most frequent, and that's the been there, done that, because probably every product in some form has been tried at some point. So for example, the video phone, early on, people wanted video phones. You could tell from things like the Jetsons and all these experiments people had been doing, but every one of them had failed over and over and over, right? So you can imagine, about the time FaceTime was coming out, can you imagine being the product manager trying to say, hey, I want to make a new video conference technology here. And everybody would point to you and say, hey, that's never worked before. But how do you get around that? Well, you know that there's an opportunity, but one thing that really helps is to be able to understand exactly why all those products are failing. So if somebody says, been there, done that, have them explain to you all the context of why it failed before. So when you start looking at the video phones, you can understand that first, they were super expensive. So a consumer isn't going to buy something that's $1,500 for the product. And I even read something that the cost of a video phone that they tried to do in, I believe, the 50s or 60s, a 3-minute call was like $150 in our cost. So maybe it was just cost. Another part, the user experience. Look at how small those cameras were, or how small the video screens were back in the day. If you don't have a great user experience, that's another thing that's going to make your video fail. And another thing that it turned out, people don't necessarily always want to be on camera. So if you have something that's fully video all the time, somebody that gets up in the morning might not want you to see them. So to be able to get past this company innovation resistance with been there, done that, make sure you understand the problem of why the others failed, and then be able to explain how yours is so much different from that and why it will succeed. Challenges, next one. Inverted management structure. I think this is probably a very common one as well. So one experience that I had is that there was a company where all of the key performance indicators about a product were sales numbers and amount of revenue coming in, or the amount of profit. That's really after the fact of when you need to know what's going on in the product. All you see is sales, then you've already missed an opportunity to be ahead of the game, right? On top of that, though, there was this interesting culture where if it was going well, we don't need to invest any more resources into it because that one's doing fine. We'll invest our resources into ones that are not doing so well so that we can push them up. Well, think about what's going to happen when you do that. You're not going to ever get ahead of the game. And so you have this immense danger of a competitor sneaking in. This dark figure with $100 bills in the middle is my idea of a competitor dropping in from the shadows. So this competitor might completely scoop you because you are years behind, because you haven't anticipated the marketplace, because you're only concerned about what's happening in the here and now. So one way around that then was to try to understand the long-term potential and the long-term dangers of your competitors. So put together a very clear growth plan of what you need to accomplish in the future, which customers are not being served, which ones you want to get to that will make your product more robust and not so easily blindsided by every new competitor that comes around because you've been too focused on one thing. Okay, so next challenge. The requirements chasm. Seeing what's not in front of you. So I want to go through another robotics pet robot experience here that's kind of interesting. So I don't know what the requirements actually were written as this robot dog called Zoomer Pet, but this is what I could imagine that happened. So a pet dog on the marketplace always does very well at first, and then it crashes within a couple years. So this is an example where it's really easy to get immediate interest and really hard to get long-term products out. So from the requirements perspective, though, you can imagine that the requirements have to do with play. So it needs to be cute, needs to be playful, it needs to act like a dog, and it needs to be under a certain price point for consumers. So you launch this out in the market, and immediately people buy it. But then you get customer reviews like this right here. So my child was really excited. We brought this thing home. They played with it for an hour, and then they set it aside and they never played with it again. Well, it seemed that it fit the requirements when they got it. It was cute, it was playful, it had dog behaviors, it was affordable. What was missing? Well, you got to think about this in a bigger context of how children play. And children are not just looking for something that's cute, they need something that's interactive. So something that doesn't continuously give them a way to interact directly with, they loses their attention pretty quickly, even if it's cute. So the requirements then need to say something about the human condition again. So in this case, what compels children to keep playing? So that's where you look at the dog and see what exactly is it about the dog that keeps children interested in dogs. And part of that is, it's a child's best friend. What is it about a best friend? Or what requirements make you a best friend? Well, they're playing with you, they love you, they're loyal. So things that you can do with a robot then are interactivity that actually behaves with you and changes with you, as opposed to just an overt response. Things like playing games. There's been some where it plays fetch, that kind of thing. And in the end, makes it for something that grows rather than stays constant, which then loses interest very quickly. So how do you extrapolate those requirements? It's something you have to know a broader context about what it is, what it means to be a companion, not just what it means to be cute. So next one. So what's that mean for product management in the future, though? So trying to go beyond the firefighter mentality of trying to put out every problem that's coming in, it's going to be more important for product management to understand innovation, for example. This is because as companies grow, as the world grows, and as it becomes more connected, especially through technology such as Zoom that can allow people from different parts of the world to collaborate, you're going to increase the network effects of innovation, which means that you're going to accelerate innovation as a world. Therefore, as your competitors innovate faster and faster, you need to be innovating faster and faster as well. So it is going to be more and more important to stay ahead of the innovation curve. Agility, well, it's not just that you're going to have to stay ahead of it. There are going to be things that are fairly unpredictable that you're going to have to react to as well. So for example, COVID just slammed down like that and changed the world. Well, because of things like climate change and the nature of the way that the world interacts, these global disruptions are actually increasing in number. So on top of being innovative, you need to be more agile in the way that you react to how the world is changing. Exploration, this is actually a picture of Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea, who Lewis and Clark were early explorers of the Western US. In the same way, a product manager needs to be exploring the frontier as well. But they need to be looking beyond what they can see in front of them. And that's where you have this importance of a guide. Lewis and Clark weren't successful because they were good explorers. They were successful because they had good guides like Sacagawea. So you need to be understanding what the horizon or beyond the horizon holds and then understanding when is the right time to go after those opportunities that you see beyond the horizon. So the future of product management is hopefully less firefighting and more exploring and innovating. So that is my take on this whole dilemma of product management.
Excellent, Gunnar, thank you. And thank you, Richard. So let me stop our recording and then we will go to questions. 1 second.